I think it was you that mentioned the necessity for increased information sharing between the federal government and folks such as you. Totally agree. Why is it not occurring?
I think that's better left up to Mr. Rob or the chairman. When we had conversations, they've been great conversations with them. I think that we're at a point now where we've established between, say, the government and the asset owners. I think that the next step in the evolution of how we share information then would certainly include the equipment suppliers to the asset owners.
So let me kick it over to you, Mr. Chatterjee, because if we have voluntary standards, and as Senator Stabenow said, okay, well, it's very important, but everybody's testimony says it's dynamic. How can you voluntarily comply with a dynamic situation when you're not given the information about the dynamism? Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. I think there are a number of elements to this. The topic of workforce has come up. You know, cybersecurity talent is hard to find. I think
now that seems separate, though, if I may, because obviously you have somebody coding, but you have somebody else saying, "Oh, we never thought of this one, but they're coming at us this way." That's not workforce. That is information sharing.
Information sharing is a component of it as well. There's also issues, quite frankly, that are taking place with getting the sufficient clearances. FERC has been trying to do our part to do one-day read-ins so that our colleagues at the state level and industry have access to the intelligence.
Now, we've heard testimony, not to interrupt, but I have limited time. We've heard testimony because I think the Madam Chair has a fixation on this topic. So last time we had several hearings on this, and it was that the big energy producers have that clearance. There's someone there who has that clearance. But still, I'm hearing from Mr. Whitehead, who's being very diplomatic over there, that the information is not being shared. Now, you sense my frustration.
Absolutely, sir. And
So, dígame, ¿por qué? Why is that?
so again, there are challenges that occur in terms of sharing the information in a classified setting. We are doing everything we can to make sure that the information that we gather in a closed setting or an open setting is shared with industry partners.
But I'm hearing from
partners.
Mr. Whitehead, my eyes aren't good enough, it's a doctor or Mr., but that's not the case. Ms. Evans, did you have some comment on that?
Yes, sir. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss this with you. This is exactly why Secretary Perry established the CSER office, is to address the frustration that you're experiencing right now and that you're expressing. So the activities and the programs in our office are to help bridge that gap with our partners, because we're looking at it from a national security perspective. So the threats, the things that you're talking about, how do you declassify that, and then how do you get it out to the asset owners as well as to the people that are delivering services and also software manufacturers, those types of things.
So knowing that's aspirational, what
Well, no, I was going to get into we were doing things. We actually
because I got a minute and 40 seconds left.
Okay, so we have several programs underway, and the most recent example under my tenure is the APT-10 threat, where we worked with the intel community, declassified those indicators, then shared those out with the community through the ISACs, and then continuously communicate that back out. We work with the national labs. And
So why would Mr. Whitehead say that there's still an issue here?
Because the administration and the Secretary Perry and this office has been established for 4 months, and so I would ask you to give me the opportunity to increase that, because he does work with our research and development program, and there are several programs that we are actually working in conjunction with him to improve that.
Now, let me ask you one more thing. Everybody mentions this dynamic, you don't want regulations, but there was a malware incident with Entergy about a year ago. And it was on the corporate side, not on the grid side. I think it's MISO. I never know if it was MISO or MISO. But the concern was it might infect the transmission. It didn't, because it was in the corporate. That just seems like a best practice, that you'd have a firewall between somebody opening an attachment from his son, which turns out to be malware, versus that which is sending electrons from Indiana to Louisiana. So knowing that we don't want to regulate this to death, but are there best practices that are expected to be complied with? Because, for example, in a previous hearing, we heard that in some situations having an analog switch is a best practice because it doesn't allow the cyber to go all the way through, because there's one little flip that a human being has to do that otherwise protects one side from the other. So are there best practices that we're kind of mandating?
Well, we're not mandating best practices. What DOE does is share the information out with our respective partners that are represented here as well as into the community. So that specific incident that you are describing really says, okay, if you're going to gain efficiencies, don't connect your IT systems to your OT systems. Yes, that is a best practice. That is stressed throughout the community. That is talked about over and over again. I know that the ISACs have shared that information out in the community, but this is some of those things where you have to over-communicate to make sure that best practices and the exercises. We have done joint exercises with FERC. We do the exercises, we participate that because exercises highlight what you think the best practices are, give you opportunities to really demonstrate those, and then to continuously close the gap. So everybody's been talking about that. That is important.
So I have a question for the record regarding compliance with those best practices, because once you have everybody putting their electrons on the same grid, you want to make sure that they're not just thinking about it, but they're actually doing it.
Yes, sir.
So we would like to know about compliance. Madam Chair, thank you for indulging.